The story of Joshua begins in a time of great adversity for the people of Israel. The book of Exodus tells us about the oppression the Israelites faced in Egypt. In the first chapter, verse 14, we read a vivid description of this reality. The Egyptians made the lives of the Israelites bitter with hard labor. They made them work hard in making bricks and mortar and doing all kinds of work in the fields. In all their hard labor, the Egyptians treated them ruthlessly. It was in this setting of slavery that a boy from the tribe of Ephraim was born, initially named Hoshea. This name would later be changed to Joshua, which means Yahweh is salvation, a foreshadowing of the crucial role he would play in the liberation and conquest for the people of Israel. From his earliest years, Joshua witnessed the suffering of his people and longed for the freedom promised by God. When Moses finally confronted Pharaoh and led the Exodus, Joshua was among the crowd that left Egypt. The Bible gives us an idea of the magnitude of this event in Exodus 12:37. The Israelites journeyed from Ramesses to Succoth. There were about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. We can imagine the young Joshua walking with his family, marveling at the miraculous events unfolding before his eyes. The crossing of the Red Sea was a decisive moment in the life of Joshua and the entire people of Israel. Scripture vividly describes this event in Exodus 14:21-22. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind all that night, and turned the sea into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. This demonstration of God's power undoubtedly left an indelible impression on the young Joshua, teaching him the importance of faith in times of danger. During the journey through the desert, Joshua had the unique opportunity to grow under the direct tutelage of Moses. The first explicit mention of Joshua in the Bible occurs during a crucial moment: the battle against the Amalekites. In Exodus 17:9, we find this significant passage. Moses said to Joshua, "Choose some of our men and go out to fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hands." This passage shows us that even as a young man, Joshua was already recognized for his leadership skills and military prowess. The battle against the Amalekites was a profound learning moment for Joshua. The scriptures tell us in the same chapter, verse 11, "As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning, but whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning." Joshua courageously led the troops on the battlefield, while Moses, on top of the hill, kept his arms raised in intercession. This experience taught Joshua the vital importance of combining military strategy with total dependence on God, a lesson he would carry with him throughout his life. After the victory over the Amalekites, Joshua's role as Moses' close assistant solidified. We see this clearly when Moses ascends Mount Sinai to receive the Ten Commandments. In Exodus 24:13 we read, "Then Moses set out with Joshua his aide, and Moses went up on the mountain of God." This event demonstrates the trust Moses placed in Joshua and how the young man was being prepared for future responsibilities. Being present during the giving of the law and the renewal of the covenant with God was undoubtedly a formative experience for Joshua's character and faith. Joshua's loyalty to Moses and to God was evident in all his actions. A touching example of this dedication is found after the episode of the golden calf. While Moses established the tent of meeting outside the camp, the Bible tells us in Exodus 33:11, "The Lord would speak to Moses face to face, as one speaks to a friend. Then Moses would return to the camp, but his young aide Joshua, son of Nun, did not leave the tent." This passage reveals Joshua's intense desire to always be near the place where God manifested himself, demonstrating his spiritual thirst and commitment to the divine calling. Joshua's role as Moses' assistant was not limited to administrative or military tasks. He was being spiritually prepared to lead God's people. One example of this spiritual zeal is seen when two men, Eldad and Medad, began to prophesy in the camp. Joshua's reaction was immediate, as we see in Numbers 11:28. Joshua, son of Nun, who had been Moses' aide since youth, spoke up and said, "Moses, my lord, stop them." This reaction demonstrates Joshua's deep respect for Moses' spiritual authority and his concern for maintaining the order established by God. One of the most critical moments in Joshua's formation was his participation as one of the 12 spies sent to explore the land of Canaan. Moses carefully selected representatives from each tribe, and among them, as we read in Numbers 13:8, was Hoshea son of Nun from the tribe of Ephraim. It was at this moment that Moses changed Hoshea's name to Joshua, a symbolic act that reaffirmed the divine mission of the young leader and his connection to God's promise of salvation for the people. The mission of the spies, detailed in Numbers 13, was a test of faith and courage. After 40 days of exploring the land, the spies returned with a report that divided the people. While most were terrified by the inhabitants of the land, Joshua and Caleb maintained their unwavering trust in God. In Numbers 14:7-8, they boldly declared, "The land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and give it to us." Joshua's faithfulness in this critical moment set him apart from his contemporaries. While the people murmured and wanted to return to Egypt, Joshua and Caleb stood firm in their conviction that God would fulfill his promises. This attitude of faith almost cost them their lives, as we see in the same chapter, verse 10. But the whole assembly talked about stoning them. However, God intervened, protecting Joshua and Caleb and affirming the wisdom of their unshakable faith. As a result of his faithfulness, Joshua was one of the few from his generation who received the promise of entering the promised land. In verse 30 of the same chapter, God declared, "Not one of you will enter the land I swore with uplifted hand to make your home, except Caleb son of Jephunneh and Joshua son of Nun." This promise not only rewarded Joshua's faith, but also prepared him for the leadership role he would assume in the future, carrying the responsibility of fulfilling the dream of an entire generation. In the years that followed, as the people wandered in the desert, Joshua continued to learn and grow under Moses' leadership. He witnessed how Moses dealt with the challenges of guiding a rebellious people, how he sought God's guidance in moments of crisis, and how he maintained his integrity amidst trials. Each experience was a valuable lesson for Israel's future leader, shaping his character and deepening his understanding of what it meant to lead God's chosen people. Joshua's journey, from being born in slavery to becoming Moses' trusted assistant, was marked by challenges, constant learning, and deep spiritual growth. His unwavering loyalty to God and Moses, his courage in the face of adversity, and his willingness to remain faithful even when in the minority were qualities that prepared him for the great responsibility that was to come. As Moses' time as leader neared its end, Joshua was being shaped into the man God would use to lead his people into the promised land. As the Israelites approached the borders of Canaan, Joshua found himself on the verge of a new phase in his life. The years of learning, loyalty, and trials were about to bear fruit. The young man who had been born in slavery was now ready to become the leader who would lead his people to freedom and the inheritance promised by God. The stage was set for Joshua to step into his role as God's chosen successor to Moses, a responsibility for which his entire life had prepared him, and one that would forever change the course of Israel's history. As the years of wandering in the desert came to a close, God began preparing Joshua for his new role as the leader of the people of Israel. In the book of Numbers, chapter 27, verses 18 and 19, we find the moment when God instructed Moses about the succession. So the Lord said to Moses, "Take Joshua son of Nun, a man in whom is the spirit of leadership, and lay your hand on him. Have him stand before Eleazar the priest and the entire assembly and commission him in their presence." This divine choice was not a surprise, given Joshua's years of faithful service and his unshakable trust in God. The commissioning ceremony was a solemn and significant moment, marking the beginning of a new era in Israel's history. Moses, following God's instructions, presented Joshua before the entire assembly of Israel. The words of encouragement that Moses spoke to Joshua, recorded in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 31, verse 7, deeply resonated. "Be strong and courageous, for you will lead these people into the land that the Lord swore to their ancestors to give them, and you must divide it among them as their inheritance." These words were not just a mandate, but also a promise that God would be with Joshua in his new journey of leadership. The weight of responsibility was immense, but Joshua knew he would not face it alone. The transition period between the leadership of Moses and Joshua was marked by intense spiritual and practical preparation. Moses, knowing that he would not enter the promised land, dedicated himself to imparting all the wisdom and knowledge he had accumulated over the years to Joshua. In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 3, verses 28 and 29, we see Moses receiving instructions from God. "Commission Joshua and encourage and strengthen him, for he will lead this people across and will cause them to inherit the land that you will see." Moses' instructions ranged from practical leadership matters to deep spiritual teachings about the importance of faithfully following God's law. Joshua absorbed every word, fully aware of the magnitude of the task before him. Moses' final instructions to Joshua were both practical and spiritual. He emphasized the importance of faithfully following God's law and leading the people with justice and compassion. In Deuteronomy chapter 31, verses 7 and 8, Moses reiterated to Joshua in front of all Israel, "Be strong and courageous, for you will bring these people into the land that the Lord swore to give their ancestors, and you must divide it among them as their inheritance. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged." These words of encouragement strengthened Joshua's resolve and prepared his heart for the challenges ahead. The leadership transition was taking place not only in the eyes of the people, but also in Joshua's heart and mind. The encouragement of the people was a crucial part of Joshua's preparation for leadership. He needed not only to be ready to lead, but also to inspire confidence in the Israelites. In the book of Joshua, chapter 1, verses 10 and 11, we see the new leader assuming this role with authority. "So Joshua ordered the officers of the people, 'Go through the camp and tell the people, get your provisions ready. 3 days from now you will cross the Jordan here to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you.'" This command demonstrated Joshua's confidence in God's calling and his readiness to act decisively. In response, the people eagerly acknowledged Joshua's authority, the same authority they had respected in Moses. Joshua's spiritual strengthening came directly from God. At the beginning of the book of Joshua, chapter 1, verses 5 to 7, we find the powerful words of the Lord to Joshua. "No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go." This promise of divine presence and protection was fundamental to Joshua's confidence in his new position. With these words of encouragement and the promise of God's constant presence, Joshua was ready to face his first great challenge as a leader, crossing the Jordan River. This event would not only test his leadership, but also demonstrate God's power and confirm to the people that Joshua was indeed the Lord's chosen successor to Moses. There was palpable anticipation in the Israelite camp as everyone prepared for this decisive moment. The crossing of the Jordan River was a pivotal moment in Israel's history, marking their entry into the Promised Land. In the book of Joshua, chapter 3, verses 7 and 8, God spoke to Joshua, "Today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so they may know that I am with you, as I was with Moses. Tell the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan's waters, go and stand in the river." This divine instruction set the stage for a miracle that echoed the crossing of the Red Sea, reaffirming God's presence and power with the new generation. Joshua's faith and obedience were essential at this moment. Following God's instructions, he commanded the priests to carry the Ark of the Covenant to the edge of the Jordan River. In chapter 3, verses 14-16, we read the account of the miracle. So when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. Now the Jordan is at flood stage all during harvest. Yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away at a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarethan, while the water flowing down to the Sea of the Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. This miraculous event not only allowed the people to cross the river safely, but also served as a powerful testimony of God's presence with Joshua and Israel. In chapter 4, verse 14, the Bible tells us, "That day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they revered him all the days of his life, just as they had revered Moses." Joshua's leadership was thus confirmed beyond dispute, both in the eyes of the people and of the surrounding nations. After the crossing, Joshua followed God's instructions to establish a memorial that would serve as a permanent reminder of this miraculous event. In chapter 4, verses 5-7, we read, "Joshua said to them, 'Go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, "What do these stones mean?" tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever." This memorial of 12 stones, representing the 12 tribes of Israel, would serve as a tangible witness for future generations. It not only commemorated the miracle of the crossing, but also symbolized the unity of the people of Israel and God's faithfulness in fulfilling his promises. In verse 24 of the same chapter, Joshua explains the greater purpose of this memorial. He did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, and so that you might always fear the Lord your God. After the crossing and the establishment of the memorial, Joshua led the people in an important spiritual renewal. In chapter 5, verses 2-3, God commands Joshua, "Make flint knives and circumcise the Israelites again." This circumcision ceremony was crucial, as it symbolized the renewal of the covenant between God and his people. The generation that had come out of Egypt had been circumcised, but those born in the wilderness had not undergone this rite. Now, as they entered the Promised Land, it was time to reaffirm their commitment to God. The celebration of the Passover followed the circumcision, marking another significant moment of spiritual renewal. In chapter 5, verse 10, we read, "On the evening of the 14th day of the month, while camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, the Israelites celebrated the Passover." This was the first Passover celebration in the Promised Land, a moment of deep historical and spiritual significance. It not only commemorated the liberation from Egypt, but also marked the beginning of a new era for Israel in their promised land. After the miraculous crossing of the Jordan River and the spiritual renewal of the people, Joshua and the Israelites were preparing to face their first major challenge in the Promised Land, the conquest of the fortified city of Jericho. However, before beginning the siege, Joshua had an extraordinary encounter that would shape his approach to the imminent battle. In the book of Joshua, chapter 5, verses 13 to 15, we read about this crucial event. When Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" "Neither," he replied, "but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, "What message does my Lord have for his servant?" The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. This supernatural encounter reaffirmed to Joshua that the battle he was about to fight was not just a matter of military strategy, but a spiritual war in which God himself was in command. With this renewed perspective, Joshua was ready to receive divine instructions on how to conquer Jericho. The strategy that God revealed was, from a conventional military standpoint, at the very least, unusual. In chapter 6, verses 2 to 5, the Lord says to Joshua, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have all the people give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse, and the people will go up, every man straight in." This unusual strategy would test the faith and obedience not only of Joshua, but of the entire Israelite army. Joshua, demonstrating his unwavering faith and leadership ability, communicated the divine instructions to the people with confidence and authority. For 6 days, the Israelite army marched silently around the city, once a day, following the Ark of the Covenant. The only sounds were the soldiers' footsteps and the priests' trumpets. We can imagine the growing tension inside the walls of Jericho as its inhabitants watched this strange ritual, day after day. On the 7th day, as God commanded, the Israelites marched around the city 7 times. The climax of the battle is described in chapter 6, verses 20-21. When the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. The miraculous collapse of Jericho's walls was a powerful demonstration of God's might and a confirmation of the faith and obedience of Joshua and the people of Israel. This victory set a precedent for future conquests and strengthened the Israelites' confidence in their new leader and, more importantly, in their God. The conquest of Jericho also introduced the concept of herem, or total destruction, in Israel's holy wars. In verse 17 of the same chapter, Joshua instructs the people, "The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies we sent." This concept of completely dedicating the spoils of war to God, often through total destruction, was intended to prevent the Israelites from being contaminated by the idolatry and sinful practices of the conquered peoples. The victory at Jericho marked the beginning of a series of military campaigns that Joshua would lead to conquer the land of Canaan. However, This journey would not be without challenges. The next target for the Israelites was the small city of Ai. Confident after the victory at Jericho, the Israelites underestimated Ai's strength and suffered a humiliating defeat. This defeat, as they later discovered, was the result of one man's disobedience, Achan, who had kept some of the spoils from Jericho for himself, thus violating the Herem. This incident, described in chapter 7, served as a solemn reminder of the importance of complete obedience to God and how seriously he viewed sin within his people. After dealing with Achan's sin and restoring the spiritual purity of the camp, Joshua led a second successful attack against Ai. This victory opened the way for the conquest of southern Canaan. In chapter 8, verses 30-35, we see Joshua leading the people in a significant act of covenant renewal. He built an altar on Mount Ebal, offered sacrifices to the Lord, and read the entire law of Moses to the people. This act demonstrated that even in the midst of military campaigns, Joshua never lost sight of the importance of keeping the people focused on their covenant with God. The conquests in southern Canaan were marked by a series of quick and decisive battles. In chapter 10, we read about the coalition of 5 Amorite kings who joined forces against Gibeon, a city that had made a peace treaty with Israel. Joshua, honoring the agreement with the Gibeonites, led a surprise attack against this alliance. It is in this context that one of the most extraordinary events of the conquest occurs: the day the sun and the moon stood still. In verses 12 and 13 we read, "On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, 'Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Aijalon.' So the sun stood still and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as it is written in the book of Jasher. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day." This miraculous event not only secured Israel's victory, but also dramatically demonstrated God's power over creation and his willingness to intervene on behalf of his people. The Bible emphasizes the uniqueness of this day in verse 14. "There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a human being. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel." This decisive victory paved the way for the conquest of several cities in southern Canaan, including Makkedah, Libnah, Lachish, Eglon, Hebron, and Debir. With southern Canaan under control, Joshua turned his attention to the north. In chapter 11, we find the account of the northern campaign, which began with a great coalition of Canaanite kings led by Jabin, king of Hazor. This alliance posed a formidable threat, with an army described in verse 4 as numerous as the sand on the seashore, with a large number of horses and chariots. In the face of this impressive threat, the Lord encourages Joshua in verse 6. "Do not be afraid of them, because by this time tomorrow I will hand all of them, slain, over to Israel. You are to hamstring their horses and burn their chariots." Joshua's strategy for this campaign was marked by quick and decisive attacks. He led the Israelite army in a forced march to the waters of Merom, where the Canaanite army was camped, catching them by surprise. The ensuing battle was an overwhelming victory for Israel, with Joshua strictly following God's instructions to cripple the horses and burn the enemy's chariots. This tactic not only fulfilled God's command, but also prevented the Israelites from relying on these advanced military resources instead of trusting in God. After this decisive victory, Joshua proceeded methodically to capture and destroy the main cities in the north, with Hazor, described as the head of all those kingdoms, receiving special attention. In verse 11 we read, "They put everyone in it to the sword, totally destroying them, not sparing anyone that breathed, and he burned Hazor itself." The complete destruction of Hazor served as both a strategic and psychological blow to the Canaanite resistance in the north. The biblical narrative summarizes Joshua's conquests in chapter 11, verses 16 to 20. So Joshua took this entire land, the hill country, all the Negev, the whole region of Goshen, the western foothills, the Arabah, and the mountains of Israel with their foothills, from Mount Halak, which rises towards Seir, to Baal-Gad in the valley of Lebanon below Mount Hermon. He captured all their kings and struck them down, putting them to death. This comprehensive summary highlights the extent of Joshua's conquests and the fulfillment of God's promises to Israel. A notable aspect of Joshua's military campaigns was their duration. Verse 18 tells us, Joshua waged war against all these kings for a long time. This suggests that although the decisive victories were quick and dramatic, the complete process of conquest and consolidation of control over the land was a long-term endeavor. This underscores Joshua's perseverance and determination as a leader, as well as the ongoing patience and faithfulness of the people of Israel during this prolonged period of conflict. The military strategies employed by Joshua during these campaigns were varied and adapted to the specific circumstances of each battle. We see examples of ambushes, such as the attack on Ai, forced marches for surprise attacks, like the battle against the Northern Coalition, and sieges, as at Jericho. In each case, Joshua demonstrated a combination of tactical skill, inspiring leadership, and above all, a constant reliance on God's guidance and power. Throughout these campaigns, Joshua also had to deal with diplomatic issues and alliances. The case of the Gibeonites, described in chapter 9, is a notable example. These inhabitants of Canaan, fearing destruction, deceived the Israelites into believing they came from a distant land. Joshua and the leaders of Israel made a peace treaty with them without consulting the Lord, a decision that later proved problematic. However, even when the truth came to light, Joshua honored the treaty, demonstrating the importance of keeping one's word, even when obtained through deception. This situation also illustrates the complex challenges Joshua faced as a leader, having to balance military demands with ethical and spiritual considerations. The decision to honor the treaty with the Gibeonites, despite the deception, shows Joshua's integrity and commitment to moral principles, even in the face of difficult circumstances. The northern campaign in Canaan, led by Joshua, was particularly challenging due to the strength and organization of the enemies. The book of Joshua describes the Canaanite armies as numerous and well-equipped, with horses and chariots that the Israelites did not possess. However, Joshua was not intimidated by this formidable threat. Trusting in God's promises and his accumulated military experience, he led the Israelites in a series of decisive battles. Joshua's strategy of attacking quickly and unexpectedly proved effective against the larger and better-equipped Canaanite armies. His tactic of crippling the horses and burning the enemy's chariots, following God's instructions, not only weakened the Canaanites militarily, but also served as an important lesson for the Israelites about trusting in God rather than in advanced military technology. Joshua's conquest of Hazor, described in chapter 11, marks a pivotal moment in his military campaigns. Hazor was considered the main city in northern Canaan, and its fall dealt a significant blow to Canaanite power in the region. Joshua's decision to completely burn the city, something he did not do with most other conquered cities, highlights Hazor's strategic importance. This action not only fulfilled God's command, but also served to demoralize the remaining enemies and solidify Israelite control over the northern region. The destruction of Hazor can also be seen as a symbolic act, marking the effective end of organized resistance against Israel's conquest of Canaan. With the major battles concluded and most of the land of Canaan under Israelite control, Joshua now faced a new challenge: the distribution of the Promised Land among the tribes of Israel. This process, detailed in chapters 13 to 21 of the book of Joshua, was a complex task requiring wisdom, diplomacy, and a deep sense of justice. In chapter 13, verse 1, we read, "Joshua was now very old, and the Lord said to him, 'You are very old, and there is still very much land to be taken over.'" This passage indicates that although Joshua had led Israel to many victories, there was still work to be done. The distribution of the land was not merely a matter of territorial division, but a fulfillment of God's promises made to the patriarchs centuries earlier. The process of dividing the land began with a detailed survey of the territory. In chapter 18, verses 4 to 5, Joshua instructs, "Appoint 3 men from each tribe. I will send them to make a survey of the land and write a report according to the inheritance of each. Then they will return to me. You are to divide the land into 7 parts." This systematic method of mapping and division demonstrates Joshua's careful and equitable approach to this crucial task. He was not simply handing out land randomly, but ensuring that each tribe received a portion that matched its size and needs. The land distribution among the tribes was not uniform. Some tribes, like Reuben, Gad, and half of the tribe of Manasseh, had already received their inheritance east of the Jordan River, as agreed upon with Moses. Others, like Judah and Ephraim, received their portions early in the distribution process. In chapter 14, we see Caleb, Joshua's companion from their spy mission decades earlier, claiming the land that had been promised to him by Moses. Joshua honors this promise, demonstrating his integrity and respect for past commitments. This episode also serves as a powerful reminder of God's faithfulness in fulfilling his promises, even after many years. An important aspect of the land distribution was the establishment of cities of refuge. In chapter 20, God instructs Joshua to designate special cities where those accused of manslaughter could seek protection until a fair trial. Verses 2 to 3 state, "Tell the Israelites to designate the cities of refuge, as I instructed you through Moses, so that anyone who kills a person unintentionally and without malice aforethought may flee there and find protection from the avenger of blood." This provision shows God's concern for justice and mercy, establishing a system that protected both the right to life and due legal process. 6 cities of refuge were designated, 3 on each side of the Jordan River. On the west side, Kadesh in Galilee, Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim, and Hebron in Judah were chosen. On the east side, Bezer in the wilderness, Ramoth in Gilead, and Golan in Bashan were appointed. The strategic locations of these cities ensured that anyone in Israel was within reasonable distance of a place of refuge. This system not only protected the innocent from unjust retaliation, but also promoted a culture of justice and forgiveness within Israelite society. The land distribution also included special provisions for the Levites, the priestly tribe. Although they did not receive a contiguous territory like the other tribes, the Levites were granted 48 cities scattered throughout Israel, including the 6 cities of refuge. This dispersal of the Levites across the nation ensured that the teaching of God's law and spiritual leadership were accessible to all tribes. In chapter 21, verse 43, we read a powerful summary of this process. "So the Lord gave Israel all the land he had sworn to give their ancestors, and they took possession of it and settled there." During the process of land distribution, Joshua had to deal with various conflicts and disputes among the tribes. A notable example is found in chapter 17, where the descendants of Joseph, the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, complain that their portion of land is insufficient. Joshua responds wisely, encouraging them to clear more forest land to expand their territory. This response demonstrates Joshua's ability to motivate the people to be proactive and work hard, rather than merely complain or wait for easy solutions. Another significant conflict arose after the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh built an altar near the Jordan River, as reported in chapter 22. The other tribes, fearing that this represented an act of rebellion or idolatry, prepared for war. Joshua, displaying his diplomatic skill, sent a delegation to investigate the matter. The situation was peacefully resolved when it was discovered that the altar was merely a memorial and not a site for sacrifice. This episode illustrates the importance of clear communication and seeking the truth before acting rashly. As Joshua grew older and his active leadership came to an end, he gathered all the people of Israel for a final farewell speech. This speech, recorded in chapters 23 and 24 of the book of Joshua, serves as a powerful summary of his leadership and a reminder of Israel's obligations to God. In chapter 23, verses 1-3, we read, "A long time afterward, when the Lord had given rest to Israel from all their surrounding enemies, and Joshua was old and well advanced in years, Joshua summoned all Israel, its elders, heads, judges, and officers, and said to them, 'I am now old and well advanced in years, and you have seen all that the Lord your God has done to all these nations for your sake, for it is the Lord your God who has fought for you.'" In this speech, Joshua reminds the people of all the wonders that God has performed for them, from the deliverance from Egypt to the conquest of Canaan. He emphasizes God's faithfulness in fulfilling all his promises and warns the people against the danger of apostasy and mingling with the remaining pagan nations. In chapter 23, verse 11, Joshua exhorts, "Be very careful, therefore, to love the Lord your God." This emphasis on love for God as the foundation of obedience is a central theme in Joshua's final message, echoing Moses' teachings and foreshadowing the message of the prophets to come. The climax of Joshua's farewell speech occurs at Shechem, where he gathers all the tribes of Israel for a solemn renewal of the covenant with God. This location held special significance, as it was at Shechem that Abraham built his first altar in the Promised Land centuries earlier. Joshua recounts the nation's history, from Abraham's call to the conquest of Canaan, repeatedly emphasizing God's faithfulness and grace. Then, in chapter 24, verse 15, he issues his famous challenge to the people. "But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." This declaration by Joshua is one of the most powerful and memorable moments in the entire Bible. He presents the people with a clear and unequivocal choice: serve the true God or follow the false gods of the surrounding nations. The strength of his personal conviction, expressed in the statement, "As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord," serves as an inspiring example of spiritual leadership. Joshua not only led the people militarily, but also challenged them to a deep and personal spiritual commitment. The people's response to Joshua's challenge is equally powerful. In verse 16 they declare, "Far be it from us to forsake the Lord to serve other gods." The people then reaffirm their commitment to God, acknowledging all that he has done for them. Joshua, however, does not accept this response easily. He warns the people about the seriousness of this commitment, reminding them of God's holiness and the consequences of disobedience. Joshua's approach demonstrates his deep understanding of human nature and the tendency of people to make promises they may not keep. After ensuring the sincerity of the people's commitment, Joshua establishes a formal covenant. In verse 25, we read, "On that day Joshua made a covenant for the people, and there at Shechem he reaffirmed for them decrees and laws." To commemorate this solemn moment, Joshua set up a large stone as a witness to the people's commitment. This stone would serve as a physical and permanent reminder of the promise Israel had made to serve the Lord alone. The book of Joshua concludes with a brief account of Joshua's death and burial. In chapter 24, verse 29, we read, "After these things, Joshua son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. Joshua was buried at Timnath-serah in the hill country of Ephraim, the land he had been given as his inheritance." Verse 31 provides a powerful epitaph for Joshua's life and legacy. Israel served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and of the elders who outlived him and who had experienced everything the Lord had done for Israel. Joshua's lasting impact on the history of Israel is immeasurable. He not only led the people in conquering the Promised Land, fulfilling the promises made by God to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but also set a model of leadership grounded in faith, obedience, and total commitment to God. His life exemplifies the truth that true success comes from obedience to God and trust in His promises, not merely from human strength or strategy. Joshua's story also serves as a powerful reminder of God's faithfulness. From his youth as Moses' assistant to his final days as Israel's leader, Joshua repeatedly witnessed the fulfillment of divine promises. His life is a living testimony to the truth expressed in Joshua 21:45. Not one of all the Lord's good promises to Israel failed, everyone was fulfilled. Joshua's legacy continued to influence Israel long after his death. His example of courage, faith, and leadership inspired future generations of Israelite leaders. The conquest of Canaan under his leadership established Israel as a nation in its own land, paving the way for the period of the Judges and eventually the establishment of the monarchy. Most importantly, Joshua's emphasis on obedience to God and covenant renewal set a pattern of spiritual faithfulness that echoed throughout Israel's history, often recalled by the prophets in times of national apostasy. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like and share with your friends and family. May God bless you, and see you next time.